So usually I first start off with the camera just in the center and rotating it because I'm probably looking in that direction. I'm just changing the dimensions. Usually it's 1080 by 920, and sometimes, most of the times actually, I get this other section out just so I have a rendered mode or camera view open all the time so I know what I'm doing. Sometimes I keep it rendered, sometimes I just leave it on solid mode. Just a quick plane for reference, and usually add a human rig or something just for scale as well. Just so I know that the camera is at the height of an average human's, sort of where you would hold a camera in photoreal scenes at least. Just quickly dragged and dropped some assets from the BMS asset pack, which are in my asset library, which I think some of them might work. And because I deleted the human ring, I just added another one. You can't see that in camera view, so I added a cube just for reference. This is the actual reference that I was going for, so according to that I just like set up my castles and stuff and just kind of repositioned everything. I did just try to look for like a bridge, couldn't find some in Quixel bridge, looked online how it should look, couldn't really find one on Sketchfab either. I did look through a few, but they weren't up to the mark for detail and stuff, so I ended up using the Kitbash assets. They had a few good ones, so I just dragged and dropped some of them and wanted to see which one would look the best. Yeah, look at all in rendered mode, and I can actually tell what the textures and stuff are like. Although I like this big castle a lot, so I just kept with this drawbridge sort of a castle asset that we have, and obviously just looking at the camera view, I rotated it and kind of positioned the camera, the castle according to the camera. You could mess about with that according to what style you like. And I use this big castle for like a background asset. This ground plane I added I didn't really like, so I decided to use like a footpath thing, so I dragged and dropped a few of these just so I can maybe experiment with them. I ended up keeping one of them, but as you can see I just edited them a few just so they look good in the camera view, with the wooden sort of texture and the stone textures. I dragged and dropped in a character, which is also for the BMS pack, and just was deciding between which helmet to use basically. So that's a nice character we have. I isolated it, took his cape off, and just exported him out as an OBJ ready for import into Mixamo for a basic animation. Just got a basic walk animation and downloaded that. That didn't work, so I used a one without his clothes on, but that gave me an error as well because it wasn't like a manifold mesh or something. So I just quickly extruded his like leg parts out just so it's attached to the rest of the body to see if that might work, and luckily enough it did work with Mixamo, but I just didn't want to use the actual clothes. I might want to cloth sim on that later, so I can attach it later. Just used a quick walk animation and exported that, imported that into Blender, and it was all working fine. Obviously it didn't look fine because he had a weird kind of torso, but I added the cape and clothes back on. The cloth simulation was hell for me because it was just colliding with each other, and it was a pain. So I tried to use the rig that was provided with the characters to maybe see if I could animate it or something, but it's just so confusing, and it didn't look good when I tried to basically pose the rig for the cape. So I ended up screwing that, pinning some part of the cape so it stays in place, and then animating or simulating the rest of it just so I can get a nice fall for the cape, but it was just not working so well with collisions and stuff. It was just going all haywire. I did tweak the settings a lot. At the end I found that the lower the collision distance I was getting, the better the results. But you do have to play along a lot with the cloth sims usually. I tried adding collisions, I tried deleting collisions, baking everything. It just wasn't working so well. So I opened up a new Blender file just with the character in, just to test the cloth sim and see how it would work the best. Changed the quality steps, I changed the settings. The problem I was having was it was colliding because it was a quite thick mesh and it was quite close, the vertices were quite close, so I guess maybe that's why it was just colliding within itself. Just to see if it was the body of the actual character that was interacting, or if it was just the cloth itself. I just made a quick plane that was roughly the shape and size of the back of the character, and just to see if maybe my cape would collide well with that. I was running into the same problems with that as well. It wasn't much better in the beginning anyway. As you can see, after a lot of tweaking and playing around with just random settings to see if it's just my mesh or if there's some problems with the cloth simulation, I found out that by decreasing the distance it was actually not too bad. Yeah, so the cloth simulation started to look a bit better. I decided to add some wind just to maybe decrease the amount of collisions and the need for a good simulation. Eventually I got it to look somewhat good, so I decided to use those same settings or similar settings inside my actual project file. I just quickly put a cloth simulation on its actual clothings and just animated that with the cloth sim with the collisions and stuff, and that wasn't too hard. That animated pretty well. I guess because I now knew the collision and cloth settings and stuff. Quickly bake my animation to see how it is. Kind of went overboard with that, but then I got like a good result with the cape flowing and the sort of cloth animation of the actual body. I tried playing around with some of the shape keys as well, because some parts of the mesh was still colliding and kind of peeking through the cape. But the shape keys thing wasn't working. I tried applying it shape keys. I tried animating as keyframes and everything, but it was just getting worse and worse. So if anyone has any better solutions to how to edit a cloth sim after the cloth sim, maybe they can let me know in the comments below. That would be really helpful for the future, because I spent a lot of time in this, tried to Google stuff and wasn't really finding a solution that I could use, and I just got sick of it at the end. Meantime, I was just checking out Resident Evil 4 while it's baking to see if I can maybe download that. Anyway, I tried to add the sword as well to see how it looked with the walk cycle. Maybe it gives more character to the character, to more personality of the character. But even after setting it up, I couldn't get it because the orientation wasn't right, and I just didn't feel like playing with it too much. Even with the sword and everything set up, when I played the animation back, it just looked weird with the sword in the hand, so I let that go, deleted it. Added this water body, which was real water. Looked pretty good in the beginning. I just changed a few settings, tweaked it up a bit, until it looked sort of good. It was scaled up quite a lot, which made it look a little low resolution, but I fixed that later. was basically just playing with the settings and seeing what looked good and what didn't. So yeah, with the water on top it looked quite good, but obviously you could see the ground and I didn't really like that. Added some foam or like interaction with the objects that I was going through, which looked pretty nice. Went on to add some trees just for like a foreground element that I knew would be a good part of it, especially with depth of field and everything on. I tried one with leaves and one with just the twigs and bark and stuff on a dry tree, but I liked the one with the actual leaves a lot more. Just made some adjustments to the type of tree, the positioning, the scaling, played around with that until I found something that I liked. Yeah, so I tried a few different HDRIs, just drag and dropped. This is a great add-on by Polyhaven. Makes it so much easier just to see which background looked nice, what lighting looked nice, get a feel for a few, and then I can tweak it according to what I like or don't like. Played with the rotations of some of them and the strength as well. Added a different plane just for the floor, which would be a mix of a gloss and transparent shader, just for like a watery effect, almost like it had rained recently but not too much. So just played with that a bit and put it on as a ground. Added a sun lamp because I was feeling like the lighting was adequate, the shadows were a bit non-existent, so that did help with the shadows and stuff. I was just also just checking the background, what background looked nice. Obviously trying to keep the angle of the sun the same as the angle of the HDRI. Added a bit of a roughness, sort of like a normal map to my water that I placed on the ground. Didn't really need to, but I felt maybe just to give it a bit more detail, although in the final render you can't actually see it so well. Yeah, then I went ahead to just add a few of these background birds that I found online. It was free. It's just like different types of birds, flock of birds just randomly generated with geometry nodes that I can just put somewhere in the background. So I just positioned that according to how I liked it. I had a few more in the mid-ground sort of area. Obviously you change the number, the speed and everything with that, and it looked alright. Yeah, I'd never played with this before, so I was just checking and experimenting with different settings and stuff of what it changes, but for the most part I kept the settings the same, just changed the path a bit, so obviously they keep going from one side to the other without much deviation. I also added some leaves. There's a nice little add-on or blender file that's called Easy Windy Leaves or something. So I just added like it's basically geometry nodes. Changed the color to green, just because my trees in the foreground are also green colored leaves. So I kind of wanted to match that vibe. I had a normal map and just toned it down a bit, just so if you do happen to see it, it just looks like some sort of I guess like twig branchy veiny thing inside the leaves, and obviously these are just scattered around with the simulation. I did a quick cube just because I wanted some sort of depth in the scene. It was looking a bit dry or a bit too clean, so I added a principal volume to the cube just to get a nice mist or fog. Obviously the emission was on, so I had to turn that off, and then we got the density and stuff fixed. And that does give a lot more atmosphere, a lot more depth to the scene. Volume is like the single greatest thing you can add to any scene probably, and it will make it look definitely better if you know how to play with the settings and the lighting as well, if it's like especially at nighttime or dark scene. But usually it's just a standard volume box that I put on if it's like a scene like this, which is just open. Quickly tweaked some settings for my Turbo Tools add-on for a quick render. While it's rendering, check my progress for Resident Evil 4 download or whatever. So my render was done, and I was just giving a quick look. Like, it doesn't look too bad, but I felt like maybe the cube, the volume, can I see it or not? Maybe is it just too low, or maybe I just didn't render it, I don't know. So I thought maybe it's the size of it. So I went and changed the size and scaled it down, because sometimes the scale does affect the actual volume, the particles per, like, I don't know, square cube or something inch. So yeah, it sometimes does affect the actual density of the volume if the box is big or small. Probably more noticeable in, like, if you have like a noise texture or something on it. I realized later on that these boxes were basically cubes that were, because my cube was added to the collection of the leaves. And if I just look through these two renders, one with volume off and one with volume on, sort of, the lighting decreases, but it gives me much more depth to the scene, and it's just not so clean, I think, which makes it look more realistic. Although shadows and stuff are more visible and sharp without the volume, but I guess that's just what I was going for. You have to really switch between the two views to see it again and again to see if there's much difference. Later I was not happy with the lighting so much, so I decided to add a sky texture and basically join it with the actual HDRI, so that I can have the HDRI as the background and the sky texture driving the actual lighting. So if I turn on rendered mode now, the sky texture, which is on the bottom, would be the one that shows up as the background. So if I just switch these up, then the background will be the HDRI and the sky texture will be the one that's driving the lighting. But because I had to still tweak the actual sky texture and the lighting with it, I had to remove the light path node and then just view the sky texture node, so I can tweak the lighting and settings for that. I had to turn off the volume because the volume was making it very slow, and I realized that my leaves were actually just volumes because it was in the same layer, same collection, which I removed. Yeah, so without the volume, going back to the lighting, tweaking it according to what direction the HDRI's light's coming from as well. And just playing with the settings really. So I did a quick render with the new lighting settings just to see if it really made a difference or not, and it did. I like the new lighting settings a bit more. It did have a bit more shadows, even though we had like a volume cube and everything. Keep up to iterations with small tweaks and stuff. You can see in the render mode, but I prefer to render it out at times, just so I can quickly go back and forth between the images and then find what's missing or what needs to be tweaked, and then going back and tweaking the lighting or the density of the volume or the positioning or rotation or whatever, and then according to that I can fix my lighting and rendering again. There's usually just subtle differences that maybe you can or cannot decide between which looks better, but you start to realize with time and practice that which one actually is better or more realistic or probably more accurate. Going back to my props and stuff, wanted to add more stuff to the scene just so it doesn't look so clean. Just added some random like bricks and stone and stuff and wood. Also wanted to change maybe the flooring. I didn't really like the flooring. With making my own flooring, I can customize it a bit more. So just dragged and dropped a few from Polyhaven, which I think is awesome because you can set the subdivisions for the displacement and also the size of the texture, which helps a lot. And displacement helps a lot with the realism, even if it's subtle, because at least it doesn't look flat, and flat stuff come on, we all like curves, don't we? Yeah, try to add some rain just to see how it would look, but obviously it was like a foggy sort of a day, so at the end I didn't really like the rain, especially how it played with the floor. It's kind of not what I wanted, even though I tweaked it a bit, but I decided to delete it. Next I went ahead and just played around with the actual drawbridge, because I wanted to animate the drawbridge. I thought that would look cool instead of just leaving it static during the animation. Obviously the drawbridge has like chains and stuff that we need to animate as well, so I had to separate the drawbridge, separate the chains, and then create like a central point of origin for the drawbridge to like lower down. I tried it a few different ways, tried to keep the chain, but obviously the chain was oriented in a difficult way, and it wouldn't really be animated as easily. So I decided to get rid of the actual chain that was in the original model and just play with one of the chain links and create my own array. Sort of might be easier to manage and control. So I did that and used a curve or a path to kind of define where the chain would be, and then I can obviously play with the number and the positioning of the chains and the path. So I just tied it to the, because it's like it's far away, so it doesn't have to be too accurate. I can eyeball it and just animate it so it looks like it's drawing closer. But because the number for the array is the same, so it started to extend backwards, so I just had to animate that as well, and then just rendered out a quick one to see how it looked like, just for an update. Yeah, I decided to animate the camera a bit to give it a bit more dynamic, I guess, dynamics. So I was just checking, should it be left from right, should it be back to front to back, playing around with a bit of the stones and stuff, positioning up, because you need to keep tweaking stuff according to what it is. So now my characters was in the middle, but I put him to the side so we can see the castle gates as well as the character and not have everything in the middle. So there's a bit of like a rule of thirds sort of thing for composition. Some of the things just got messed up because I'd keyframed them already and then I moved the castle, so had to redo a few of them, which is alright. So I rendered out an animation overnight just to see how it looks on a low resolution, sort of a low sample count, and it didn't look too bad, but I kind of spotted what I don't like. For example, there are too many birds in the mid-ground. Maybe the floor is kind of intersecting with the footing of the character. I need to add some motion blur, some depth of field, maybe a bit more density to the volume, stuff like this. The water is static, it looks low resolution, so I have to keep viewing it just to like kind of saying to myself what needs to tweak, what needs tweaking, because I need to keep amending it, make it better, because it's never just good on the first sort of render. You have to keep doing it until you don't see much that you can improve anymore. Sometimes you even have to get up and come back after a while because you need like a fresh set of eyes on it. So I thought the number of the leaves were too much, they were just all in the way, so I had to change that to something more manageable. The birds were too much, so I had to decrease them just so that they give a subtle sort of a hint that there is some life around here, but not just in your face, like add as many birds as you can sort of thing. Change the positioning a bit, just so they're not hindering like the path, going back to the video that I animated, just so I know if I'm missing anything or not. Yeah, so the cape was intersecting again. This probably gave me the most tough time out of everything else, because I had to keep going back to it, baking it, playing with the cloth simulation. I don't know if it was the mesh or if I'm just bad with cloth simulations, but it was just not working as I wanted it to. I hoped it for it to work, because the cloth, the inner body cloth was also simulated, the cape was also simulated, so I couldn't really do much with the simulation being baked in and not being editable, which was a pain. So I just got like the actual body of it and just deleted it or moved it inwards a bit, because I thought maybe that is the reason that's intersecting so much. Just checking where it's intersecting and what is the actual thing that's intersecting, see if it could be fixed. But every time I turned the simulation back on, kind of got back to where it was, where I started from. So I just deleted some of the part of the actual mesh that I'm not going to see anyway, and that was intersecting, but from the camera view it wasn't really visible, but that kind of ruined my simulation and I didn't really want to bake it again. So this took probably the most time out of the whole scene, the fixing the cloth animation and stuff, but it was, at the end, it was not intersecting. And I felt like maybe the cape was a bit too shiny at some point too. Just tweaked around with the volume density to see if it might look any better with a bit more density. Yeah, and as you can see, the cape was a bit shiny, too shiny. So I played around with the roughness, switched between the specular and roughness, and put a color ramp and crunched those numbers in so that it looks more like cloth and not, I don't know, silk or something. So I was happy with that. Had to fix the water next, so that was too low resolution. I applied the scale, which I forgot to, which made it a lot better. Could see the waves and ripples and stuff, and just tweaked around with the colors and animated the waves or something a bit, just so that there is some sort of movement. It could have been static as well, but since I made the waves like there is a visible rippling, might as well animate it as well, which wasn't too hard. I added a tree animation. To the tree I needed to add some wind sort of animation so that it's a bit more alive as well. For some reason it wasn't working in the beginning, but I was just stupid because I didn't look that I hadn't selected the right thing. So with the tree animation, wind animation sort of working, it was a bit strong, so I kind of toned that down a bit and set up the depth of field, because we had to set up everything that was missing. Initially I kind of had a change in the depth of field, so it would be like focused on the castle at the beginning of the scene, and then later in the animation it would be drawn closer towards the character. but when I animated and kind of saw the render, I didn't really like that, so I wanted a static. It didn't really look real, so I wanted a static sort of a depth of field. Played around with the f-stop value because I don't want it to be too strong, because I want to actually be able to see the background as well, that I sort of managed with so much time. The stones and stuff in the foreground were a bit weird and I didn't really like them, so I tried to play around with a few different variations, but I didn't really like them either. They were a bit weird looking, like sharp edged and everything, so I just edited the one that I already had to make it in a better position and placements and stuff. Deleted a few that I didn't need, just because I thought maybe it would look better. Yeah, just reviewing what else I need to tweak. Found out that maybe the flags in the background are not moving, the leaves, the trees are moving, the cape is moving, everything is simulated because there is wind, so the flags should definitely be moving. So I separated them out into different objects, had pins and stuff applied to them, because obviously they were facing the wrong way anyway. Had pins and stuff applied to them, and then simulated them with the same sort of wind power or strength, so that they would look like they're flying around in the wind as well. Because the same amount of wind is just affecting different flags or different cloths differently, I can play around with the field weights, and obviously change the direction because the wind is moving from right to left, so I need to keep it consistent throughout the scene. As was pointed out to me in one of my earlier videos, that the wind direction doesn't really match, so I decided to keep an eye on that the next time. As for the actual simulation, it doesn't have to be very accurate or very good because it's far in the background, but it just needs to have some sort of movement. Yeah, so the animation was looking good, baked all the dynamics. And it's now part of our scene, which made it look a lot more realistic, I'd say. The ones in the background, I was just checking. I don't want like half of them to be moving and half of the flags to be static, so just had to check if any of them were static. So I rendered it out again with everything, and look and see like all the corrections I made and if it looks better or not, with the wind moving and stuff, and the tree moving, the water is a lot better. As you can see, this is where I found out that the change of depth of field or the focal range wasn't so nice. So I changed that first, and then I played around with some of the settings for the foreground and background elements. I forgot to fix the intersection of the character with the floor, so I just brought him up a bit so that he's in line with the flooring, and then that looked a lot better. Playing around a bit with the camera animation just so it's not as fast as maybe it was. Yeah, so these two flags were not moving and they were in the opposite direction as well, so that was kind of putting everything off. So I deleted them instead of simulating them again because I don't need that many flags, and that made it look good. I just check out how it looks in render mode, see if that intersection is actually bugging me too much, or if I can kind of get away with it somehow. If I can make some quick cheeky tweaks to it. Apparently it wasn't as visible on the render, so I think I might have just left it, especially with the camera moving slowly. Obviously the tree was a bit too, the wind was a bit too strong for the tree, so toned that down a bit as well. Set that stuff up, and just replayed the animation, see if there was anything missing. So yeah, I saw the water intersecting with the sort of the floor or the start of the floor, so I just had to bring that down a bit. Subtle tweaks here and there, just so it's nothing is obviously intersecting or too obvious to be a CG. Obviously we can't, I mean we can, but like try to get as much out of it as you can to photorealism. You might not be able to get as far as actual photorealism, but you can get pretty close. So then I did like a high sample count render that took a longer time, but at the end I checked how the animation looking with all the tweaks and everything, and it looked good. So I imported all the sequence into After Effects for some basic color correction. I use Magic Bullet's Lux, which is really nice and easy and quick for different color variations, lots and stuff, and I just scroll through them to see which one I like, which one looks good, what mood I'm looking for. Sometimes I even change it depending on if I see something that looks really cool. And they have so many, and it's so easy to just apply and sort of add and remove different components for the color correction stuff, that it makes it really nice. So I made this one which was supposed to be like a mellow photorealistic sort of thing. Open it up in Resolve because I wanted to add some music and stuff for the actual reel, and just playing with how it would look good. Should I reverse it? What should I do with it? I added a few more color corrections to have like a different kind of a look for a different render, just so that there's like a variation, or maybe I like one more than the other. Added a nice soundtrack that I thought would suit it basically, and played around with the timing and the length of the clips and stuff until I found something that I was happy with. Rendered that out when I was happy with it, and then imported the other sort of color corrected video that I had, and made another reel for that. For that I needed like a solid view render, so I decided to remove my actual character, put him into a different collection so that I can just hide him completely, and then render that solid view mode sort of. So there's like a before and after, or before render, after render sort of transition. Played around with the settings and the music and stuff until I found something I was happy with. Then rendered it out. But then I was done, and I had 2 videos ready to sort of post. That's great. So hope you guys learned something or saw sort of my process of how I go from A to Z with the whole video making, reel making, scene making thing, and obviously fixing some of the errors, some things you can't see in the camera, so you just kind of let it go. Some things you just get fed up with and just let it go. So there's always something to learn, and there's always something to improve on, but you've got to judge how much time you want to put into something versus how much quality you're getting back. So that's it from me for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you stayed till the end, thank you very much. Hopefully see you in another video.